So I'm going to play a clip for you guys, and I'm going to use that clip as a springboard to speak about something that Mr. Z thinks is coming down the line, and we'll speak about it, and you guys let me know what you think in the comments. Like, share, subscribe, and we'll speak about this on the other end of this clip right here.
In America in the 1960s, there was a man who was convinced that there was something frightening hidden under the surface of the new, modern suburbs. That behind what looked like a confident individualism that was rising up throughout America, there were really hidden fears eating away at people from inside.
Oh, these are gorgeous. Look.
There were feelings of anxiety, loneliness, and emptiness. And he was convinced he could make a lot of money out of these feelings. He was called Arthur Sackler. Sackler had trained as a psychiatrist, but in the 1950s had turned to advertising drugs and medicines to doctors. And more of the doctors he talked with told him about people from the suburbs coming to them with vague feelings of anxiety and fear, something the doctors didn't know how to deal with. Then in 1963, the company Hoffmann-La Roche hired Sackler to promote a new drug called Valium. He offered it to the doctors as an extraordinary new way to treat these inner anxieties. And, he said, it wasn't dangerous or addictive. Valium became an amazing success. By 1971, it was the most widely prescribed medication in the Western world. Hoffmann's plant in New Jersey turned out 30 million pills in 15 hours, enough to satisfy global consumption for just 5 days. Valium had touched on something inside human beings, but nobody knew what it was. The new wave of feminists pointed out that far more women than men were taking Valium. They said the drug was being used to blot out the feeling that millions of women were having that there was something badly wrong with their lives. That when they did what they were supposed to, it didn't bring the happiness they had been promised.
And I thought to myself, well, there's got to be a better way for me, and I went about it in the way that I wanted to. I did what I wanted, regardless of what society was saying. And then it all kind of caved in on me, and I just figured, well, what's the use? And so I ended up in the state hospital. But now that I'm on the road back, I found I don't see there is any solution, because if I act the way society tells me to act and abide by the rules, my life is fine and everybody's happy.
But Arthur Sackler suspected that the drug had touched on something much deeper. That the women who spent their days alone in their new suburban homes were in a kind of laboratory of the future. They had discovered, before anyone else, the underlying weakness with the new individualism. That you were free, but you were alone. Women told researchers, I feel empty somehow, or I feel as if I don't exist. And, Sackler knew, more and more men were also beginning to take the drug. The women had just got there first.
For those of you that caught that, yes, Arthur Sackler, yes, that Sackler family, the Sackler family that created OxyContin. This is Arthur Sackler. The Arthur Sackler they're speaking of is before he went off and created OxyContin. This is when he was working with the company to create or advertise, better yet, Valium, right? So Sackler family has your local Midwestern white family overdosing on drugs. They're leaning all over, all in public, walking sideways, right? And that Sackler family is now a billionaire family. That's number one. Number two, black women. Do you understand these are the women that you're coveting their positions? These women have been comfortably upper middle class, if not solid middle, but upper middle class for the past 50 plus years. Many of them got to those positions starting around the late 50s, mid 60s, early 70s, and yet they've been on these drugs for decades. Not individual white women, but white women as a group, right? To the point where, if I'm not mistaken, President Ford's wife had a problem with these type of prescription drugs. Think about how unfulfilling it is to get to the position where you have the husband you want, you have the car you want, you have the house you want, you have the type of children you want. You actually achieved the dream, and yet you feel so unfulfilled that you're now taking prescription drugs. Meanwhile, we have black women who are anywhere from solidly middle class all the way to working poor that are coveting your position because they think you live on the greener side of the wall, the greener side of the gate, right? Of the picket fence. They're coveting your position. Meanwhile, you have this position and you're overdosing on drugs. So we'll go into my main commentary. I just wanted to point these two things out just in case anyone else missed it. And let's go from here. We're going to name this the upcoming shatter. And what I mean by that is the psychological shattering of people in America, specifically women, because this is predominantly a male space and a heterosexual male space, and the men in this space date women. What we know is that as of 2018, a quarter of women were on antidepressants, right? Between the ages of 40 and 50. Many of us in this space are millennials, so we will be transitioning into our 40s within the next decade or so. If not in our 40s, our very, very late 30s. We will see that, in my estimation, we will see that number, 23%, we're going to see that grow, number one. Number two, the age is going to decrease. That age is going to most likely come down to about 35, maybe even early 30s, right? Why am I making these predictions? Because the demographic of people that have been the most advertised to and have had the notion of the American dream and the white picket fence sold to them the most were not boomers, they were not Xers, they were millennials and Gen Z, but definitely millennials. And what Mr. Z is predicting is that many millennials, specifically millennial women, still have a hope, right? All through their 30s and their late 30s, the door isn't closed yet. But as they transition into their later 30s and early 40s, and they see that that college degree didn't give them what they wanted, right? And they didn't end up with the man that they wanted. They don't have the lifestyle and the car and the kids, the house, right? The income. Or if they want to be a stay-at-home mom, they don't have that life. What I'm saying is that that will cause Americans writ large, yes, even though some men, but definitely women, to shatter. They're barely holding it together now. For those of us who are in the dating scene or who have recently left the dating scene, we understand when we're speaking to a lot of women, they're barely holding it together psychologically. They say things that if it wasn't for your sex drive, you would run the opposite direction as fast as humanly possible. And for many of us who have the sexual discipline, we'd still run the opposite direction as fast as possible. The delusion, the entitlement, right? We will see that come to a head with the reality of their life, definitely as they transition from under 35 to over 35, from under 40 to over 40 years old. I'm calling this the great shattering because I really think that a growing number of Americans will be on antidepressants, but specifically women. They were advertised to like no other, arguably in human history. Some of what we see with the swirler movement, the divestment movement, the black women in luxury movement is that insane escapism. And when you think of, for those of us who want to be somewhat sympathetic to the plight of women in this case, primarily black women, when we think of the television shows and even some of the music videos, some of the movies, and what it portrayed to all of us, and how young girls who are now women, how they took in that information, that entertainment, how they were advertised to, and how they were ego stroked and placated all through their childhood, all through their early adulthood. When they have to come to the realization and come to terms with the fact that they are not going to live that life, most likely, that was a lottery chance that was being advertised to them, that particular husband, that particular lifestyle, many of them are going to shatter. When they're still in college loan debt, in their early 40s, and everything is not right and tight anymore, right? And guys stop calling, and even the 3 o'clock in the morning, guys stops calling. Many of them are going to shatter. And I want men, especially in this space, to be careful. This is the last call for alcohol to get pregnant. This is when some of them are going to get violent, get extremely moody, be cursing out their children or whoever, whatever sexual partner they might have, right? Cursing at them, insulting them, belittling them. Not because of necessarily anything these people are doing wrong, but because these particular women haven't come to terms with the fact that they didn't live the life they wanted to live. And that's no one's fault, but maybe theirs for having these type of expectations and not really investigating how you got these expectations and why you have these expectations. So I want all men, and quite frankly, even other women, to be careful for everyone around you, but in particular, what I'm estimating going to be the shattering of women in particular in the upcoming decade or so. We already have the article from Morgan Stanley that is telling us that somewhere between 25 to 44% of these women within this decade will be single. What that means is not married, but many of these not married women will also not be in any relationships and not have any children. We already saw with COVID-19 how many of these women were pushed to the raggedy edge, how many Americans writ large, but particularly women were pushed to the raggedy edge psychologically, mentally, because the job was the only thing holding them together. But what happens when you get sent home? Or what happens when you work from home and you're in that apartment by yourself, right? And you're in that apartment by yourself, not 5 hours at a time or 8 hours at a time, maybe 12, 13 hours at a time. No, for a couple weeks at a time. So I want everyone to be careful, and even yourself, check on your own mental state. Talk to family and friends. For those of you that have some, for those of you that don't have some, maybe this is a good time to invest in some. Get out of those echo chambers that are regurgitating your same worldview over and over to you. That's not healthy. But many people, in Mr. Z's estimation, many people are going to run right into the wall that is reality. And everything that they built to help them with their escapism, with their delusions, is going to shatter. And so too, they will shatter. And some of that shattering is going to be them going in on themselves, right? Kind of becoming recluse, folding in on themselves, better yet. Some of that is going to be certain people lashing out at others around them. Why is Mr. Z giving this message in with this somber tone, and it's very depressing and it's dark? For those of you who are not paying attention, automation is eating a whole lot of jobs, right? More and more people are becoming lonelier and lonelier. We have study after study showing us this, telling us this, right? People have less friends. They've had less sex, less sexual partner, less children, not getting married, not buying homes, not buying new cars, right? All of that comes to a head. See, when it's only 2 or 3 or 5% of your population, you can maybe manage that. When it's 10%, it looks a little ugly. But when you're working on a quarter of your population that's in this particular type of position, maybe even a third of your population, that can do some serious social damage. And we already know in the Black community what we're dealing with. This is another thing that we can't afford to have, this other straw in our back. And this is way more than a straw. So I'm telling everyone to be careful, check on your people, even check on your people online, your online friends and associates. Mr. Z is going to pause right there. Mr. Z out. Y'all be careful. Mr. Z out.